suggestion of anything at all.
Chicago theater is ensemble theater.
We have people coming from all over the world to Chicago to improvise.
Anybody who does improv comedy is influenced by Second City.
If the world were only cute, we would not be funny. We would fill our wallets with adorable baby bunnies.
And that's cute.
I'm Monroe Anderson.
And I'm Ed Tracy. Welcome to Chicago Conversations, a show on commerce and culture, where people who make art to live talk to people who live for art.
We're at Second City, the funniest place on the earth.
When it comes to comedy, Chicago's Second City is first in funny. For over half a century, the comedy juggernaut has expanded operations to include television, educational programs, and touring companies, while their alumni collectively have garnered more Emmys than any other comedy institution in the world. This season's Emmys were no different, with alumni Tina Fey, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Stephen Colbert walking away with honors.
Just how did a small cabaret theater founded in Chicago's Old Town neighborhood grow into the most prolific and influential comedy theater in the world? What inspired the Second City's branded form of improvisational comedy? And how does it manage to continuously turn out the nation's great comedic voices of our time?
We'll discuss this and much more about the Second City coming up on Chicago Conversations. When Second City opened in 1959, no one could imagine what the profound influence of this small theater in Chicago would have on comedy in every medium. In the mid-1950s, there was the Playwrights Theater, and then the Compass Players, before the Second City Company was formed. Central to the comic evolution of the day were the directing and coaching techniques of Viola Spolin, whose theatrical games and performance philosophy transformed theater to the edgy, innovative art form we now know as improv.
To some, Viola Spolin's improv games, born out of the Depression era, seemed like child's play. And that was understandable, because to some degree, they were. Robin Hammond is Director of Marketing at Second City. Robin, tell us a little bit about Viola Spolin and how she came to invent the games, as it's called.
So Viola Spolin worked at Jane Addams' Hull House, and she worked with children. And she worked with children that often didn't speak English as their first language. So they were trying to communicate with each other. She created these games which helped them communicate with one another, play with one another. And her son, Paul Sills, saw these games, brought them to his theater group, and they started using these games in their work. So eventually these games became what we use at the Second City to create material.
Viola had some rules.
Yes.
Now, what were her rules?
One of the most important rules is yes and that is agreeing. You know, one of the worst things that you can do in a scene is if someone comes to you and says, let's go on a picnic. If you look at them and say no, the scene is over. Right. It's over. Right. However, if someone comes to you and says, let's go have a picnic in the park. Yes, I'll bring my hot air balloon. Suddenly you have a scene. You know, you can go on and on from that point. So it's one of those things that helps build, and it's a really important rule in improv. And that's one of the first things you'll learn in your class.
Recently, Columbia College Chicago partnered to offer a comedy degree in its theater department. Besides the 3 regular reviews at its Old Town stages and 4 touring companies performing all over North America and abroad, Second City has become an industry leader in bringing improv-based techniques to the corporate sector. As a middle manager at IBM, for example, how will taking a course at Second City help make me a better communicator, a better manager? What's the philosophy behind it?
Well, I think being Managing is about listening. You have to be open. You have to be a good collaborator. Even if you're in a management position, you still have to be a great team player. You have to know how to work with different personalities. You need to know how to get different personalities to work together, to work collaboratively together as an ensemble. That's what we do every single day. So coming in, we teach you how to listen. We teach you how to work within a team. We teach you how to communicate more clearly and more honestly. You know, this work is all about being authentic. So if I am in business and I'm right all the time, you're not, and you're not going to be very successful. Come here and we can help you to find the best you possible.
The Chicago Iconic Company continues to create unique comedy media in television, film, and the digital realm.
In terms of the work that we do, it's very similar to what we were doing when we opened the doors, back in 1959. I think the improv community has certainly gotten bigger. Chicago is the birthplace of improv in North America, and the community that's in Chicago now is incredible, and it's now got a national audience. You can see shows on television where people are improvising. You know, it's something that more people are aware of and have an expectation of what they're coming to see.
What may not be as commonly known is that Chicago's comedy institution has also become a show business empire. It has training centers in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Toronto that teach 13,000 students a year about improvisation and acting, including classes for preschoolers.
We have people coming from all over the world to Chicago to improvise and to learn how to do this work. It's amazing to me. If you go and take a class in the Second City Training Center, probably about half of your class will have said that they moved to Chicago in order to study with us.
Carissa Barreca is a member of the Second City Company.
You just want to have a good base when you start here. You want the same language, the same vocabulary. I had the background in performing, but now I was getting that, like, the cornerstone of what Second City is. Like, you were learning the yes and all the rules and what Second City is known for.
What Second City is known for has been borrowed and copied amongst comedy theaters and television shows everywhere. It's studied and it's practiced before it goes into play. It appears to be totally spontaneous, but it's not.
One of the big things about Second City is we don't incorporate tons of costumes and props and sets. What we like to do is create that environment, and we use object work. Like, instead of having a ton of mugs or something, we just create them out of thin air and use them and place them down, remember where they are, go back to them. So we get to create these whole new scenes and lives and stories every night together.
Okay, the shows that you present are pretty much formed,
Yes.
but they come out of the improv. Will you explain how that happens?
Of course,
Yeah.
yes. So a Second City process would start with all the cast in the room, and we would go through different ideas or pitches and then improvise them out and beat them out, which means we would go from big moments in the scene and improvise in between. So we'd know the beginning, middle, and end, but we don't know how we're going to get there. So we improvise to get there, and then we script off of that.
You were born saying, I want to be a Second City actor. So how did this happen? When did this happen? Yes.
Well, actually, I think I was born like that. My family has been in Chicago forever. In Arlington Heights, our family has always loved the Cubs. Second City, we're Chicago, and my mom took me to a Second City show when I was too young, I think, to go. And but I loved it from the minute I saw it, and even when I remember being like maybe 12 years old, being like, that's what I want to do.
You got the jokes back then?
Yeah, I mean, at some level, I got those jokes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Some
On
went
some
over.
level,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Exactly. Because you were 12.
I was 12.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Okay, first graders? All right. Now today we're going to be drawing pictures.
You could see a very polished, a very clean, a very funny and fast show, depending on what stage you see. Currently on the ETC stage, you're going to see a clown car named Desire, which is like a very fast, funny show about desires and dreams, and it's all got a through line, but none of the sketches really relate to each other until the end. Ooh, hint. There is some improv in it, so you're going to see that. You're going to be able to call out suggestions to the actors, and we'll be able to improvise within that. For the most part, it's a very structured show. And on the main stage, they're doing Let Them Eat Chaos, which is beautiful. This is like a sketch show and a poem had a baby, and that is on the stage. It is the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful shows I've ever seen. I love it.
Raspberries. Raspberries, thank you.
You know what most kids hate? Raspberries.
Not the one you eat, but when you hold them down forcibly and you onto their stomachs and their free skin, they hate it.
It's a given that when Saturday Night Live is in search of talent, the Second City is its first destination. Is the dream to make it to Saturday Night Live?
I don't know any actor that would say no right now to Saturday Night Live.
They're gonna ask you some quick fire questions. No reason to ring in, all right? Just shout out the answer when you know it. 25 seconds on the watch, and go!
What were your first impressions of each other? I liked him. She was short.
Something memorable happened on this date.
I met her mom.
You met her mom. What? True. Was there a first kiss on the first date? How did the two of you meet? Folk dancing. Folk dancing?
What kind of car did you drive back then when you first met?
Subaru.
Subaru, all right.
How would you describe her mother? Oh man. The nicest.
And that's time!
Well, it's also about learning your craft.
Sheldon Patinkin has written extensively on the history of Second City and Viola Spolin's influence. Someone that I talked to said whatever Sheldon Patinkin says is right.
Well, that's nice to know. I don't agree with it, but that's nice to know.
And on the alumni of Second City, Sheldon Patinkin says it all. Alan Arkin,
Brilliant.
Dan Aykroyd,
Tough.
John Candy,
Sweetheart.
David Steinberg.
Pain in the ass. One of the people that developed a following at Second City. He was very popular with the audience. People would come back to see him again. But he himself says he was a pain in the ass.
Bill Murray,
Funny. Bill Murray, during the improvs, used to stand at the back of the stage with a cigarette and a cup of coffee and come in when he knew that he had a way in, and then go back again into the next time.
Barbara Harris,
Very talented, a little bit crazy, and beautiful. And still one of my best friends.
Gilda Radner,
Everybody's girlfriend.
John Belushi.
Amazingly funny.
As he sees it, Second City has left its imprint all over Chicago. Most theater here is ensemble. He says that makes the difference. Tell us a little bit about Viola Spolin's influence in this time.
It's enormous. Viola created the theater games that everybody learned how to play, either through Viola or through her son, Paul Sills, who was the original artistic director of the Compass, as well as the playwrights and Second City. They are the games that teach you how to improvise, that teach you how to listen and react instead of, as Viola and Paul kept on saying, get out of your head.
Spolin's son, Paul Sills, with Bernie Solins and Howard Alk, developed the Compass Players. In the group were Mike Nichols and Elaine May.
They would ask the audience for an author, any author of any kind from any period, and they would improvise a scene in the style of that author. I don't think anybody would be able to do that now, including our cast.
The Compass Players created a brand of comedy all their own. Did you all know that it was going to be something special?
No. We opened it as a coffee shop with a place to do a show where we could have friends and sit around and talk. Had no idea it was going to happen like this. The alumni of Second City and Compass and Playwrights together is most of the entertainment world of the second half of the 20th century and still going on.
And they were developing this material from newspapers and everything that was happening during the day. I mean, it was happening immediately.
Oh yeah. Compass had what was called the Living Newspaper, which was part of their show every night, and it was based on that day's newspaper. They would improvise off of pieces from the newspaper. I don't know if I should say this now, we used the Sun-Times because it was the most portable.
Was there an aha moment for you when you became artistic director after Paul Sills left?
An aha moment? It was a terrifying moment. I was Paul's assistant. I had directed a couple of shows, of plays, and one day Paul was yelling at the cast during rehearsal, as was his wont. I don't think he threw any chairs that day, and said, "See what you can do with them, Sheldon," and left. About a half hour later, I walked across the street to the Lincoln Hotel restaurant, where he was usually sitting and smoking and drinking coffee in the days when you could smoke in a restaurant. Remember those? But he wasn't there. So I called Bernie Solins, producer, and said, "Bernie, do you know where Paul is?" And he said, "Yeah, he's on a plane to New York. You're the director now." I wouldn't call that an aha moment. I'd call that a terrifying moment.
In 1973, Bernie Solins expanded his comedy company beyond American borders and took on Andrew Alexander as a partner.
He had control over, I guess, owned the fire hall. It was an old fire hall which he had turned into a club. And when Second City opened in Toronto, they never got their liquor license. And the place wasn't air conditioned, and it was summer. So it didn't last for very long. And then Andrew called Bernie and said, "Why don't you bring it over to the fire hall?" So Andrew became the Toronto Second City producer with the franchise.
Is there something that you look for in a student or a performer, particularly during your time at Second City?
I have a preference for the kind of improviser, actor who can become the next character instead of making the next character like themselves. And I look for that a lot. That was Alan Arkin. That was Steve Carell. He was one of the best improvisers out of character we've ever had at Second City. As opposed to Belushi, both Belushis really, you could always tell it was Belushi. You could always tell it was John Candy, but they were so good at it that that was fine too. I mean, like John Candy was not that good when he started, and he kept on disappearing into the background a lot. But eventually it came out, but you could see that it was there. As a director, I want to know that my students, as a teacher, can get work in a lot of different characters, not just their own.
What's changed today? How did we get where we are today?
I think the first change was Laugh-In, where everything was shorter. And at the same time, commercials went from personalities of the show themselves giving the commercial to minute and half-minute spots. Then in the 70s, 3 things happened in a row. Within 2 years of each other, I think it was. Animal House, Saturday Night Live, and SCTV, all of whom became fairly well known to the general public as having a lot of people who came from Second City. That changed, to a certain extent, the nature of the audience. More tourists, more people looking to see John Belushi on stage, or, since that was not going to happen, the next John Belushi, or the next Bill Murray, or the next Gilda Radner, or whoever they were looking for, whoever their favorite was. And at the same time, well, the reference level changed. I'm not saying better or worse, although I think better or worse, but the reference level changed from literature and politics and psychology, whatever, to television and film and Stephen King.
What is the secret to Second City's success of having so many of these alumni go on to such great things?
It's not a secret. We hire good people. They hone their talent and their technique at Second City and then go on.
Can anyone be funny?
Viola used to say so. I don't think so.
What's the difference?
A viewpoint of the world and of the people in it. There has to be a certain amount of negative viewpoint. You also have to be willing to make fun of yourself. You perform 6 nights a week, 1 or 2 shows a night, plus a set of improvisations afterward. And you play different characters in different scenes. You're building your ability to be. There are performers, there are writers, there are directors, there are producers. It's just an amazing learning experience.
I really enjoyed talking to Sheldon Patinkin during this program, and his story about Bill Murray in Toronto was priceless.
Oh yeah, you mean where he beat up the
Yeah. Who takes a heckler and beats him up in the middle of a comedy show? It's amazing. And Gilda Radner being everybody's girlfriend, and his whole thing about Barbara Harris, just amazing.
Yeah, now, you know, what people don't think about is that these people are wild and crazy guys and gals before they get to places like this, and they make it work.
And they
for
form relationships, I mean, throughout time. And this whole 50th reunion they had a couple of years ago, people came in here and they picked it right up like they had been working together for all those years together.
No, this place is incredible.
Yeah,
you know,
it's great to be here.
Yeah,
too, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been coming here since the 70s, and just seeing people over the years, it's wonderful. This is Comedy Church here.
It certainly is. It's been just a wonderful, wonderful time. And that's about it for tonight's show.
See you next time.
Joan Rivers.
Stand-up, which doesn't work very well at Second City. She was unhappy there. Most of the cast was unhappy with her. But she's a very funny woman.
Peter Boyle.
That's one of the saddest ones. Peter was smarter than the whole rest of the company, and much more politically oriented than the rest of the company. And it became a choice of letting Peter go or letting the whole rest of the company go. So we had to let Peter go. He understood, and we hired him for touring things, etc. afterward, because he was really good.
Harold Ramis.
Brilliant.
Martin Short.
Nice. We all know they're funny, so I don't have to say that right.
Everybody partakes of tradition on some level, whether they're even aware of it as tradition or not. Traditions are very dynamic. They move and they change. People often think of folk music or traditional music as being a museum piece, a relic that exists in some kind of ossified, never-changing condition. But indeed, any tradition that has got vitality to it is continually changing and growing.
Going down that road, feeling bad, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated this way.
Studs Terkel knew the owner of the Blue Note, and the Blue Note was interested in booking an act on Monday nights because they had an open night due to the union contracts. and took a chance that this I Come For To Sing group would be something that might be successful. And it turned out it was tremendously successful.